When talking about Donald Trump's tariffs or the stupidest trade war in history, I usually say that we don't know what's going on. We don't know if Donald Trump is using them as pretend leverage he doesn't have, whether he's saying that he's going to bring back manufacturing jobs, which he won't, and by the way, left under his first administration. But we do now know that Donald Trump knows that he's losing. It's why he is caving to China. Apparently, the art of the deal is bluffing, then going all in, and then folding before the cards come out before you because you're too scared, which is exactly what Donald Trump has been doing. And when Karoline Leavitt was pressed on that very fact on Fox, of all places, yes, the Fox propaganda outlet, she did exactly what her boss has been doing, and that's implode. And we're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we can get into Karoline Leavitt's appearance on Fox, of course, we have to see what Trump said that led to her being asked that question about his tariffs, and it started this morning.
Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine. And we're going to have a country that you can be proud of, not a laughing stock all over the world for many years. You know, in 1913, they traded to the income tax system. We used to be all tariff, and we had no income tax, and we had the wealthiest country we ever had proportionately. From about 1870 to 1913, it was all tariffs, and we had more money than anybody. They had committees how to spend the money. They had so much money they didn't know how to spend. Then some brilliant person said, let's go income tax. Let's let the people pay. Now, we're going to be able to substantially lower taxes when this is finished.
Although the plan, and I do put that in quotes because really a plan, but although the plan of Donald Trump's tariffs changes every day, we don't know what's happening with this trade war, one thing stays consistent. The man doesn't understand what a tariff is, and he also doesn't understand the history of tariffs and the economic disaster they caused, which they are causing. Again, you don't need to be a historian to understand tariffs don't work. You just need to open your eyes a little bit in the present. But like I said, Donald Trump has clearly done that. He's opened his eyes enough to see that the markets are tanking, bonds are going crazy. It's what led him to do that 90-day pause in the first place. But now, as things get more expensive and businesses, small and large alike, reach out to him saying that shelves will be empty, prices will be soaring if he continues this plan, he's bent the knee to China. And Neera Tanden pointed that out perfectly, and I want to hear what she had to say before we get to Karoline Leavitt.
I'm not convinced, because I basically think what happened is that the president looked at the headlines that the stock market has collapsed, the bond market is collapsing, our global credibility is collapsing, and he finally met a force that is stronger than him, which is the U.S. economy and Jay Powell. And Jay Powell was not intimidated, and I think it's actually a lesson. If you were not intimidated by Donald Trump, he may well back down. And
Don't you agree, Joe Biden to continue Donald Trump's tariffs on China and increase them into more things like solar panels?
There's nothing, just to be clear, there's a big difference between 5%, 10% tariffs on solar panels and 145% tariffs on everything.
But the through line is getting tough on China and disentangling. Are Democrats now for China?
Is it really getting tough on China to say, after all these weeks, to say, oh, we're going to make a deal, we're backing down? He's basically
But you didn't answer my question. Are Democrats want to take China's side in this, or do they want to get tough on China and disentangle?
I think it's not tough on China, actually, to threaten them and then back down. They learned that you're weak and they're strong.
No, the job he's going to do.
I want to hear what she says. Don't talk. Go ahead. Finish your point.
Yes, my basic point is I think it's a demonstration of weakness to threaten another country and then back down. I think that is not tough. That's weak. And I think a president who did that, if a Democrat basically made all these threats and then climbed back down, every Republican would be attacking them as weak.
I want to bring you back in.
I'm so glad that Neera Tanden pointed out this false narrative being pushed by conservatives that Joe Biden loves tariffs just as much as Donald Trump does and employed them in the same exact way when it's clearly not the case. But also, Donald Trump isn't employing tariffs either. He's oscillating between 0 and 160, and the 160% tariffs he's leaving are the ones that are the most damaging, which is why he has decided to pull back after getting nothing from China, even though Karoline Leavitt might want to argue the opposite for some reason.
Right, Karoline, we're watching markets. They seem to be so sensitive to everything that comes out of the White House right now, whether or not, the Federal Reserve Chair will keep his job, whether or not the president's softening his stance on tariffs. Most recently, saying that, talking about the Chinese imports, they're very high. The tariffs on imports very high, and it won't be that high. Won't be anywhere near that high, said the president. It'll come down substantially, but it won't be zero. Is it fair to say, Karoline, that the president's stance on tariffs with China is softening?
I don't think that's fair to say. In fact, I spoke to the president about it this morning. He is not going to give up on ensuring that there are fair trade practices around the world. He is not giving up on the fact that China has been ripping off the United States of America for far too long.
She is contradicting her boss, which has been the thing that has been most shocking to me through this entire saga, that MAGA, which is always lying in their messaging, usually is at least telling the same lie, but they're not doing that here. Donald Trump has publicly said, ceding any sort of leverage that he had, that the tariffs on China will eventually go to zero. And he didn't say they'll go to zero because China wants to make a deal. He just said they're going to go to zero because he knows they have to. And so Karoline Leavitt disagreeing with Fox, confronting her over Trump being soft on China in this stance, which he is, and which is what Neera Tanden said in that clip we just checked out, is spot on. I hate to give Fox credit, so I'm not gonna. I'll just say that they're right, and Karoline Leavitt is unrightfully freaking out. This messaging makes no sense. Pete Buttigieg was just talking about it and how Trump is not going to bring back manufacturing right here.
I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. People think South Bend, they know Notre Dame.
Notre Dame, yeah.
The big employer that propelled South Bend wasn't Notre Dame, it was Studebaker. Studebaker made cars. It was before the big three, it was the big four. And we were one of them. It dominated our city, grew our city. And then in 1963, they shut down. That's 20 years before I was born, and we were still dealing with it 20 years later. We were still dealing with it 50 years later when I became the mayor there at the age of 29. And what had happened was, when we were going to school, I would go in between just acres of collapsing factories that literally looked like a war zone. I have been to war zones that look very similar to the way a lot of places in the industrial Midwest, like where I grew up, looked because of some of these things you're talking about. Right. Which is why I think there's an appeal to saying, we're going to bring back manufacturing, right? And by the way, again, I don't want to move away from what I was saying that we shouldn't go back to where we were, because I think a lot needs to change. But I would point out that in our entire lifetime, the year when there was the most investment in factories in the United States, the most factories being built, was last year. Because there were a lot of policies, the chip stuff, the manufacturing stuff, trying to get more of the green economy stuff to be built on U.S. soil, that led to a lot of these factories. Now, a lot of them are still in construction as we speak. Some of them actually opened, some of them still haven't. But right now, in Kokomo, Indiana, I just read a story today about 370 workers at Stellantis who just got laid off. Auto workers who got laid off because of the tariffs. So this is a tool that you can use for sure. But it's absolutely critically important that you know what you're doing when you do. And if you're just making shit up as you go along, or if you're doing it for a reason that's actually less about helping middle America and more about consolidating power, which is what I think is actually happening. We can get into that.
Yeah.
Then it's not going to...
There is no through line in this administration. There is no theory on the case of tariffs that makes any sense or resembles, some cogent message, which again is the thing that they're usually on top of. They're lying in their message, but at least they're delivering the same one. But that's not the case anymore. This administration was supposed to be about lowering prices, but it's done the complete opposite. And what's Donald Trump doing with his time now? Well, he'll go ahead and tell you.
You said you were going up to the lawn for a flag. What was going on?
We're putting up a beautiful, almost 100-foot tall American flag on this side and another one on the other side, 2 flags, top of the line. And they've needed flagpoles for 200 years. It was something I've often said, they don't have a flagpole per se. So we're putting one right where you saw us, and we're putting another one on the other side on top of the mounds. It's going to be 2 beautiful poles.
About
Paid for by Trump.
Why is the President of the United States focused on decorating? What? Like, this has gone beyond stupidity at this point. But listen to what Karoline Leavitt had to say in defense.
I'm sorry?
Can you talk about the motivation behind, as well as the significance of the president's move to install massive American flags?
Oh, the flags. I thought you were referring to the flags we lowered in honor of Pope Francis. Yeah, look, I mean, the president is a real estate developer at heart, and he's always looking for ways to improve the White House complex, not for him, but for future generations, for future presidents. He has some fun ideas for this complex, which we've kept you all apprised of as they have happened and will continue to do. So you can expect to look up, I think, quite soon and see a very big, beautiful American flag, perhaps on the North Lawn and the South Lawn. I think it has yet to be decided. So we'll see you all later. Thanks, Caroline.
He's a real estate developer? Okay. Can he be the president while he's the president? It's just, I don't know. MAGA will probably find a way to defend this and say, you know, we're bringing patriotism back, whatever that means. Conservatives sure do like to talk about how things look rather than how they are, and how things actually are is pretty terrible. I don't know how patriotic and American it is for us to be ruining America's standing in the world. I don't know how loving it is of our country to defy the Supreme Court and the Constitution, but sure, go for it. This is the most incompetent administration in history, and it is, again, increasingly shocking to me that every decision they make, they then contradict. There is usually some through line. I know I've repeated this, but it is still so baffling that although it is a lie, it is the same lie. That is no longer the case. There is such division and such chaos within Donald Trump's White House. One they said was going to be run differently this time, and now it is just confusion. And I know that to some people may seem just like, oh, DC gossip, the inner working, who cares? But that's not actually the case. Conservatives so often pass off Donald Trump and the chaos around him as, oh, his mean tweets. The liberals, they get so angry about the mean tweets. But Donald Trump's chaos has destabilized America to the point that it is impacting our economy. When you are a country that does not follow its own laws, that cannot keep an idea or a policy straight for more than 24 hours, why would any other country, let alone businesses domestically, want to invest? They don't. So the guy who you said you would accept a little bit of chaos for because it'd bring about a great economy is actually giving you chaos, destroying an economy he is already screwing up. And I think that's an important message that we're going to continue to talk about on the show every single day. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around at the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.